All right, we're going to continue with 7.1, and now I'm going to pull all together the things I talked about with the first video for section 7.1, and we're just going to do some examples, and hopefully you can get the hang of this and how you're working backwards, coming up with a strategy. So let's take this example right here. If the Astros win the playoff, then the Braves will lose the pennant. If the Astros do not win the playoff, then either Connolly or Davis will be fired. The Braves will not lose the pennant. Furthermore, Connolly will not be fired. Therefore, Davis will be fired. Okay, so if Astros is A, we'll just make A for Astros winning the playoffs, right? B will be the Braves will lose the pennant. If the Astros do not win the playoff, we'll call that not A, right? Then either Connolly or Davis will be fired, C or D. The Braves will not lose the pennant. We'll call that, we'll symbolize that not B. Furthermore, Connolly will not be fired. That's C. That's not C. Okay? Because C is Connolly will be fired, or, you know, either or. So not C, and then Davis will be fired. We will call that D. Okay? So if we were going to come along here and put this into an example, we would do something like this. If A, then B. Premise 1 would be if A, then B, right? If the Astros win the playoff, then the Braves will lose the pennant. 2, if the Astros do not win the playoff, not A, then either Connolly or Davis will be fired, right? The Braves will not lose the pennant, not B. Connolly will not be fired, not C. Therefore, there's the conclusion, so draw a slash. Davis will be fired. Okay? So we draw that line, and if we go back up here, actually if we go over to the second page of the handout, we're just following these steps. Symbolize this argument, numbering the premises and writing the conclusion to the right of the last premise separated by a slash. And now we're going to do step 2. The conclusion is now derived from the premises added on successive lines. Each new premise derived will have its justification written to the immediate right, and a justification involves a specific rule of inference applied specifically to one or two premises that derives another line based on the valid rule of inference. Okay? So let's go back here and let's work this out now. Okay? So we'll come down here. I'm going to extend this page. Okay. So I'll number this 5, 6. We're going to, okay, so we are trying to get D, right? We're trying to derive this. So the first thing you do, look for the proposition you're trying to derive in the premises, and there it is. And this is all about how do we get D isolated eventually by itself. What steps? So you have to think backwards so you can start the steps and eventually end on your last line. We want to write the D and be able to justify it. So I see the D there, and it's a consequent. It's part of a disjunction that is the consequent of a conditional. So if I can get a not A by itself, I can get C or D by itself. And if I get C or D, let's say we got C or D by itself. Do you see how we have a not C right there? If we had that not C with this, we could get D through DS, right? Disjunctive syllogism. So you look for clues. Here's what we want to derive. There it is. I need to get this by itself because then I can use it with line 4 to get D. Now how do I get this by itself? If I had a not A, I could get this by itself through modus ponens. So there's no not A by itself right now, but can I get a not A? And if I use line 1 and line 3, I could get a not A with modus tollens. You remember, modus tollens is this: if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P, right? Anytime here we have an antecedent that's got a tilde on it, if you can see an A without the tilde, if you use modus ponens, modus ponens is one of the best ways to get an antecedent of a conditional negated. So I'm looking at 1 and 3. So if I had 1 and 3, line 1 and line 3 all by itself, if I just pull it out, right? Forget about line 2 and line 4. If I had line 1 written out and I wrote down line 4, which is, line 3, I'm sorry about that, which is not B, none of you would have a problem using modus tollens over here, deriving that, right? If A, then B, not B, therefore not A. And you remember, you have to see these P's and Q's. This is the P. Here's the Q. This one is the not Q. This is the not P. Like that Da Vinci Code. You just see it kind of blinking in the movie where the actual code was. Here you're always looking for the if P then Q skeleton beneath any other letters that are used. Here, even though it's if A then B, not B, then not A, I can see this is the skeleton. This is a substitution instance of if P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to use lines 1 and 3 to get not A. Okay? Line 1, line 3, and I use modus tollens. Now, you never waste your time in proofs. So here, I got the not A for a reason, because I can use the not A now with line 2. If not A, then either C or D. Not A, then we can write down C or D. And that would be lines 2 and 5, modus ponens. And just to make sure that you see the P's and Q's, do you realize this is the P? The P is not A. Either C or D is the Q. Not A is the P. And either C or D is the Q. And that is a substitution instance of if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Now that we have C or D on a line, we can get D just in one more line. Okay? Because C or D with 4, so if I use line 4 with line 6 using DS, I can get D. And if this helps, bring out line 4 and line 6. And we can put it in the order you're used to. There's line 6, and line 4 is not C. These cancel out, and you get D with DS, okay? And so we're done. So that's an example how you do that. Now let's do some other examples here, okay? Let's write this down. Oops, didn't need that. Okay, what about this? Premise 1 is if A, then not B. Premise 2 is if C, then B. Premise 3 is A, and we're trying to derive not C. Okay? Alright, so what would we do here? There's not C, and we see that there's a C right here. And remember, that is the antecedent. And often a way to get the negation of an antecedent is modus tollens. So you look for clues. I'm probably going to use modus tollens, but the only way to get modus tollens on here, I need a not B. Okay? Because modus tollens, remember, and use the flap of your book, right? Okay. Is if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. You see the P there is negated? So if we have if C, then B, we need a not B. Okay, how can I get a not B? Well, if I use lines 1 and 3, I can get a not B. And if you can't see that, pull it off to the side. If A, then not B. A, therefore not B. And actually you get that through modus ponens. If I said modus tollens, I didn't mean that at this point. So 1 and 3, if I use modus ponens, okay, then if A then not B, A therefore not B. So I would put down 1 and 3 modus ponens, and let's do this again so you see those P's and Q's. This is the P. Not B is the Q. A is the P, not B is the Q. And that is, if P then Q, P therefore Q. So 1 and 3 written off right here gives us not B. Now we're not wasting our time. I wanted that not B for a reason. So with the not B, I can use it with 2 and get not C. Okay? And if someone says, hey, what right do you have to write that down? Well, I use line 2 and line 4 with the rule of inference, modus tollens. And remember, we can write this down. If C then B, that's line 2. I used it with line 4, not B. And you all, if that was just by itself, you would see that you could get not C. And so we're done here. 1, 3 modus ponens, and then 2, 4 modus tollens. Okay, let's do another example. Okay, if F then G to either F or G, 3 not G, 4 if H then if G then I. Okay, and we are trying to derive if F then I. Okay, so the first thing you do is you've got to know this. You remember you have your 4 rules of inference. What of those 4, which one concludes with a conditional? Hypothetical syllogism. You remember hypothetical syllogism, if P then Q, if Q, this is from section 6.6, if Q then R, therefore if P then R. So I'm looking here, if our conclusion is a conditional, we're probably going to be using HS, okay? And I'm noticing, here's another thing that makes me feel good about using HS, okay? I'm already seeing 2 conditionals. I'm seeing if F then G and if G then I. Now this isn't isolated, but let's say this was. If I put if H then G together with if G then I, what does that give us using HS? It gives us if F then I. And let's do the P's and Q's again. Remember, the F is the P, here's the Q, Q again, there's the R, here's the P, and this is the R. Okay, if P then Q, if Q then R, therefore if P then R, there it is, right here, right? So I know we want to get this. I can see that if this is by itself isolated, if I use this with this, which I did over here, scratch paper, you know, off to the side, this will work. So really all I need to do is find out a way to get if G then I by itself, and we're home free. Well, modus ponens will isolate a consequent of a conditional, and the consequent here happens to be a conditional of this, okay? So how can I get H. And actually, this here, got to correct something here, everybody. This is supposed to be an H, okay? That won't confuse you too much because we hadn't gotten there yet. Okay, that's supposed to be an H. Let me make sure I wrote this down right. Okay. So if we can get an H, we can get this by itself. Is there a way to get an H? Well, there it is. Maybe with disjunctive syllogism, can we get a not F? If we got a not F on a line all by itself, we could knock this off and get the H. So remember, you're working backwards, okay? So to get this, I need an H. To get an H, I need a not F. And I see a way to get a not F. Modus tollens. If F then G, not G. So if you had if F then G, and you had a not G, that'll give you a not F, okay? So I'm going to write down not F, and if someone said, what right do you have to write that down? I said, well, lines 1 and line 1 and line 3, modus tollens, right? This is the P, this is the Q, this is the not Q, this is the not P, right? Okay, so line 1 and line 3 with modus tollens gives me line F, okay? Gives me not F. And I needed this not F because now I can use not F with line 2 to get H. I will put H down for line 2 and line 5, and we use disjunctive syllogism, right? And if we had wrote that down here, either F or H, not F, therefore H. Okay? Let's do it again. That's the P, this is the Q, not Q, and then, I'm sorry, not P, that's a P there, and then we get Q, okay? So that's why with lines 2 and 5 we got that. Okay, now we got our H, and we got that for a reason, okay? So line 7, we can use the H now with 4 to get if G then I. Line 4 and line 6, and that would be modus ponens. And then 8, we're home free because we can use line 1 with line 7 to get our conclusion. F then I, and that'll be line 1, line 7, H, S. Okay, we'll stop here and I'll do 2 more examples on the next video.